All right, everyone. Tony Fox is a transformational energy healer, conscious change agent, and founder of Conscious Energetics in Queensland, Australia. Through his work, he integrates energetic modalities, spiritual wisdom, and embodied practices to help individuals raise their frequency, clear blockages, and step into alignment with their highest purpose. Tony guides people to break free from subconscious constraints, awaken their innate gifts, and live as radiant, sovereign beings in service to the greater whole.
Well, that
Man, I
sounds
tell
pretty
you,
good,
if
Thomas.
there's a close,
Well, close. Yeah, close.
that's a heck of a bio, man. That's important work right there.
I think I'll put that on my resume.
You got it already. It's there. I'll send it to you. Can you tell us a little bit of history, if you would, and what got you started on this path?
So I grew up in a very good family with very good parents. But despite that, around the age of 10, I was a victim of sexual abuse. By the age of 15, I was on the streets and somewhat lost, buried in addiction and practicing things that I shouldn't have been practicing. It took me many years of clawing my way out of that. And by my mid 20s, I was trying to have normal relationships with people, which was very difficult. I just didn't have the wisdom, I guess, that equipped me well enough to navigate my way in the world. By my mid 30s, I immersed myself in IT world. I found myself as a web developer here in Australia and threw myself into that. By about 45, I retired and retired to my 10 acres of land up here in the bush. And in the course of trying to navigate my own issues, I'd studied hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming and things like that. But after I retired, I found myself in a position where, for my own journey and my own healing, I delved into the world of psychedelic assisted therapy. And I found that extremely beneficial to my own cause. And in the course of that, I started working as a practitioner in that field, specifically with bufo compounds, which is extracted from a toad in a Mexican desert somewhere across the planet from where I live. In the course of dealing with people's trauma and people's life experiences and the stories that people tell, so it's not even the actual experience that happened to them, it's their recollection and their stored memories of these things that happened to them. I found that it was very difficult to deal with all of the stories. In traditional psychology models, I'll get you to lay down on the couch and start telling me all the things that have happened to you. I don't really have that luxury, particularly with complex PTSD cases. It would probably take me 30 years to hear all those stories of what happened in the first 30 at the disadvantage of doing anything different. So in the course of my journeys into the psychedelic realm, I started to get some very interesting perspectives. And one of those perspectives is that when you meet someone, regardless of how they look and regardless of how clever they may be, it's my unconscious feeling about them that is going to determine the next thing that happens, how I respond to them, whether I step towards them or whether I step away from them, which made me look at what our unconscious expressions are to the world. And literally, we are unconsciously bleeding to the world all of the things that have ever happened to us. And, we talk about things like vibe, and we all know when we meet someone, we use the languaging of, oh yeah, their vibe's really good, or their vibe's a bit sketchy, or what is it that people are feeling from us? They're feeling from us our unconscious expressions mostly. And what I've found is that once we start to inform our unconscious, we start to emit different expressions. And so probably the best example I can give you is that there was a time when we couldn't drive a car, and we were practicing to drive a car, and every gear change and every blinker change caused us anxiety, and we had to think about it all. We had to concentrate. We're extremely anxious. But after a short amount of time, we learnt to drive a car, and nowadays we don't even think about it. We're chatting away to people, we're text messaging, we're listening to the music, we're tapping to the screen. So we know that we can program our unconsciousness to perform complex tasks. When I'm driving a car and something jumps out on the road in front of me, my unconscious responds by pulling the steering wheel to the left before my conscious mind even says, "What was that?" And so, through the process of setting some higher self intentions about who we wish to represent ourselves in the world, We can program our unconsciousness to by default represent those. And when we start to clean up our vibrational expression to the world, how people feel us, people respond completely differently to us. And the most important thing is that in the process of that, we are no longer governed by all of our Pavlovian unconscious responses to the world and our triggers and our fears and our unconscious beliefs. We have some solid intention. Instead of our ship languishing around on the ocean, getting smashed into the rocks, we actually take the steering wheel of that ship and we chart our course through our world, and the world responds differently. And so it was powerful enough for me in that realization for me to start practicing that. And once I started practicing that, I noticed not only a change from the world around me, but I noticed a significant change within. So my central nervous system was calmer. I was sleeping better. Perspective of who I was changed. And I'm not talking about what my conscious mind thinks that I am, but I'm talking about what I deeply feel within. For a good part of my life, I could not say that I liked myself without it feeling disingenuous. I certainly couldn't say that I loved myself without it feeling disingenuous. But at this point in my life, I can, with hand on heart, say that I feel like I'm a very good man. And I can say that with all of my heart and soul and believe it. And that profoundly affects the way that I am in the world and my agility in navigating this world.
Yeah, that's an awesome way to be for sure. If you can go to bed at night and believe that you were a good human, then that's a good thing. That's definitely a good thing. How is you were talking about the psychedelic therapies with the toad. How is that different from I say ayahuasca?
And so I've worked for over a decade with ayahuasca and in support of ayahuasca. So ayahuasca, at the core of ayahuasca is a compound NN-DMT, which when you consume it, you see lots of amazing things visually. You know, you see flying unicorns and all manner of things. With 5-MeO-DMT, it's a completely different psychedelic journey. Rather than seeing things in your mind, it's more like a psychedelic journey with every cell of your being. I saw a very interesting podcast a while back by Tony Robbins and Mike Tyson. Now, Tony Robbins is a very successful coach and certainly doesn't endorse substance use of any kind. But Tony Robbins was saying that his 5-MeO experience was the most important life changer for him. And of course, Mike Tyson swears by it and says that no one was able to smack him down, but 5-MeO was able to smack him down to his benefit. Scientifically, it seems to affect parts of the brain that are to do with identity thought. And so, in turning off our conscious mind for a little bit and having experience with our emotional expression, we start to develop an emotional vocabulary that serves us very well.
What do you think that is? So like ayahuasca and DMT. I've smoked DMT before a few times, so I know the experience. You know that, and it's only 8 to 12 minutes, I guess, smoking it, but nonetheless, because it's definitely a mind-opening experience. What do you think that is? Do you think that's taking us to another dimension? Do you think that's something opening up in our mind? What do you think that is that we're seeing in there?
I have a very dear friend who is a shaman from South America, and I have many discussions with him surrounding these sorts of things. And he once said to me that his grandmother told him that Mother Ayahuasca takes us from here and leads us to here. In my many years of working with ayahuasca, I can't say that there's anything external to us that's happening, but what I can most certainly say is that we are calibrated to what we perceive to be normal, and when we take things like ayahuasca and other psychedelics, our perception is expanded to the realms of other things, the realms of magic, the realms of mythology, the realms of divinity. And so in that perception shift, our view of the world around us expands and changes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely eye-opening, and you never think the same again after that.
You never
because
think
you're
the same. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
you can't unsee it. No. And you wanna see it again because you think it's a fluke or something, so you have to do it at least again because you wanna see if you see it again.
Yeah, but there's a little bit of a trap in that, Thomas, and the
Th
trap
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that I was starting to see some frequent flyers who would tell me things like, "I did it and I felt fantastic," but then I feel like it wore off, and they would end up sort of feeling like the only time they were at their best was when they were on that medicine, which really negates the power of that medicine because the power of that medicine is in recalibrating who we are and carrying that recalibration forward, which is integration really. And you can't rely upon any substance to be at your best. You can rely upon something like ayahuasca to expand your horizons and then recalibrate and carry that forward in your life. But I do see there's a little bit of a pitfall in the modern psychedelic assisted therapy paradigm, which is that it's sort of like they're positioning it as the new cure-all for everything. I was at a psychedelic conference recently that had flyers advertising psilocybin microdosing regimes for everything from ADHD for your teenage child through to Alzheimer's for your elderly grandfather. It's sort of
Mhm.
positioning it, and I certainly don't think that psychedelics are the right choice for everyone and the right choice for everyone's journey, which I guess is what led me into conscious energetics, which is a practice that requires no psychedelics whatsoever. It's ironic that I learnt about this stuff whilst working as a psychedelic practitioner. However, at the end of the day, there are a lot of ways to get to that emancipation from our psyches.
That was gonna be my next question, was to have you explain a little bit about the Conscious Energetics, your company that you started, and kinda what the mission is for that.
Well, I can tell you what the mission is for that, Thomas. The mission is that it's over the course of the years, I've done many thousands of dollars worth of self-help programs and processes and gestaltings, and I've got a extensive library of self-help books. I'm a trained hypnotherapist. I know some of the best tricks under the sun to reframe my mind. However, what I've found is that when I'm in crisis, I cannot remember any of those things at all. None of them come to my mind. And when I'm lying awake, festering at 3 in the morning, I cannot take any of those steps that will free me. And so I guess conscious energetics is a simple practice that once you embed it in your system, it's simply about raising your chi, really. It's about taking a deep breath and simply bringing up your intention. Now, for me, my default intention is an intention of honor. So it's useful to have higher self intention. So for me, the simple intention is honor. And so when I'm in crisis, I take a deep breath, bring up my image of honor, and I, I fill myself full of it. I take a second deep breath and I push it out to my world. Now, honor is felt by other people very simply. It's not a complex. I get a lot of people come through and I say, "What would you like your vibrational expression to be?" And they'll say, "Love." And I say, "Well, look, that's problematic." I get some, 23-year-old women coming through. I want to vibrationally express love. And I say to them, "Well, how does that feel to a drunk 59-year-old on the street as you walk past them? How does that feel to the couple that you've just met? And is she feeling insecure about you?" Because love is a very complex concept to us and means so many things that it can be misinterpreted when you are vibrationally expressing it and I am unconsciously feeling it. So for me, things like honor is a very simple concept. Honor makes me feel good within me. It's got to be genuine because we use words like disingenuous in our English language, and we use that word when you're telling me one thing, but I am feeling in my intuition something else. And so if you're not selling it with all your heart and soul, then you're not really doing it. And so, as I said, for me, honor is my default expression. I've trained my unconsciousness to represent honor while I sleep, while I wake, while I go and buy a coffee, while I pick up my kids from school. It feels good to me in my body, and it feels very good to people around me. And I see evidence of it in that just recently I had two gentlemen through for a session, and I was taking them through conscious energetics. And I said to them at one point, and so what is it that you feel from me? And the word honor came out of both of their mouths. And so for me, that's confirmation that what I am expressing to my world is being felt by my world.
Yeah, and people talk a lot about frequencies today. You have to be on the right frequency to get whatever you're looking for. Whatever you want people to perceive you as, you have to become that person.
Yeah,
So
that
that's kind of the same.
feels a little bit like fake it till you make it to me though, Thomas.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. Yeah, yeah.
Which to me, if somebody's faking it until they make it, to me, I will feel a sense of disingenuousness because, you can go to somebody's door and try and sell them a vacuum cleaner. But if I'm not unconsciously interpreting from the salesman that this is the best vacuum cleaner in the whole world, and there's a certain type of vacuum cleaner that they sell over here that will be the last vacuum cleaner you'll ever buy. And I've got a friend who was a salesman for it. He loved that vacuum cleaner so much he had one in his bedroom and he loved it dearly. And when he sold it to people, he sold it to people with all his heart and soul. And they believed it because he believes it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's great. Well, and that I can attest to that because my mom bought one of those Kirby's. I don't know,
That
it's like
that was that was
$1,200 vacuum. Yeah, yeah. She doesn't have any carpet. She has hardwood floors. And he was like, "Well, you can use it to clean your bed and all this stuff." And
Yeah, yeah, it's
so
true. It was a Kirby, and of course, if you're an owner of a Kirby, you'll know exactly what we're talking about.
absolutely, man. Those are good salesmen right there. I don't know what school they're going to for sales, but I'd like to go.
Well, it's because in their heart of hearts, they know they're selling a really good product, and they know they're selling you a product that'll probably be the last vacuum cleaner you'll ever buy.
How do you view the relationship between energy, consciousness, and physical reality?
I believe that it's energy from the top down. I believe that regardless of our physical energy levels, we have what's called perceptive energy. Now, perceptive energy can shift in a second. You can be feeling like your perceptive energy is high, and your ex-partner can walk into the room and you feel like the oxygen's been sucked out, and suddenly your perceptive energy is low. Our perceptive energy governs how we respond to the world. So I guess the simplest example is that if my ex is coming here to talk to me about something, and my perceptive energy is low, then the words that come out of my mouth will be based on a glass half full. My body posture, my attention, the expression on my face will all be based upon a glass half full. However, we know that in things like Qigong, that we can raise our Qi with a couple of intentional breaths, and we can feel our perceptive energy cups as fast as they emptied. And we train people in psychedelic assisted therapy and anyone. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're a massage therapist and you massage someone and you finish massaging them and you're exhausted, then you're doing it wrong because you should be raising that energy as you use that energy, and you should be coming through that massage session and walking out of there feeling strong and feeling full of energy, not drained. And so for me, perceptive energy is at the top of the pyramid because if we're not coming at our worlds with a glass full to start with, then what are we bringing? If we're not dealing with our kids from a glass full perspective, if we're not dealing with the problems with people with a glass full perspective, if we're not applying ourselves to the things that we love with a glass full, then what are we doing? We're just sort of bringing half of ourselves to it.
Interesting. How important do you think clean food is with all of this? Do you advocate that with your practice as well for people to eat clean?
I don't specifically advocate it, Thomas, and the reason is that Um, my mission was to create something that was not a 1,000-page book. I don't mention quantum. I don't mention this. I don't mention spirituality. I've tried to keep it simple and clean. Now, things like a good diet and breathing deeply instead of shallow breathing and drinking living water, and all of those things support who we are as a physical being. But what I do know is that you can be lying in a hospital bed with advanced stages of disease and still have a high perceptive energy and still have a projection, a vibrational expression that is strong and solid. And so, while certainly I would advocate not participating in practices that limit our physical being, there's nothing specifically in conscious energetics that points you in that direction. Once again, because I didn't want to complicate the process. I deal with people who are busy people with children and jobs, and it's not useful for me to say to them that you need to participate in a practice that's going to take 2 hours a day. For me, if I can get them to remember to take a couple of deep breaths and to intentionally inform their unconsciousness of who they want to be, then that's enough. And they can do that while they're driving their car or sitting at their desk or cooking dinner. And you asked me why I went into this venture. And I've thought a lot about it. And I went into this venture for one simple reason, Thomas, and that is because it helps me a lot. And so I want it to help other people. It's not a money-making venture. In fact, the course itself is $5 Australian, the cost of a good dinner over here. And I specifically made it so that it was accessible because I'm retired. I don't need to, worry about making millions or anything like that. I don't wish to become some internationally renowned life coach. I honestly, genuinely believe this helps me so much. And I honestly, genuinely believe that if I help one other person with it, then that's enough.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't get any easier than breathing, right? I mean, it's not like like you said, it's not a 2 hour activity that someone has to stop their day and do. You can do this anywhere, anytime, any time of the day, and make yourself feel better, right?
Well, most importantly, when I'm in crisis, I can't remember any complex processes, but I can remember. In fact, I'm at the point now where when I'm in crisis, I feel my body just go automatically because it's like driving a car. It's trained into my body like driving a car. And when I feel my body go, I go, oh, okay. And it's just the most simplest practice, but it is the hands down most powerful process that I have ever done for myself in my life. And I've done some very expensive courses and shamanic trainings and all manner of things that you think would have contributed to that. Well, they did contribute to that in getting me to this point where I can remember to take a deep breath when I'm in crisis, and I can remember to fill myself through of my higher self representation. As I said before, for me, it's a representation of honor. I can remember to fill myself full of that. And I don't just keep it to myself. I take another breath and I push it out there for the whole world to feel.
So yeah, it's an intentional. You're you're pushing out your intention with that breath,
Well,
right? Is that
intention informs the unconscious. The unconscious regulates our conscious actions and reactions.
can this help with, a lot of people have blockages and limiting beliefs and all that. Is this good for that as well?
It's extremely good for that insofar as we're not going back over what's happened. I can't change what happened to you before this moment. However, I can make some solid suggestions about what's going to happen next and what the way forward. Limiting beliefs, and I call them Pavlovian conditionings, triggers
Mhm.
and ways we respond to the world based upon our unconscious beliefs and values. They pretty much govern our interpersonal relationships completely. What I've found is that simply focusing on something else, focusing upon, for instance, who we genuinely want people to feel us, is far more profound because it gives us something to anchor to. Now, we spend so much time thinking about what other people think about us, but we cannot mind read and we can never know what another person thinks about us. But most certainly these days, I worry about what people feel of me because I can control what people feel of me. And if it's my belief that somebody's not feeling me well, then I can certainly change that because I'm a human being and I can change who I am. I sometimes give the example of looking down upon the earth like we're looking down upon a petri dish full of cells. And those cells have no voices or arms or legs. In fact, the only influence those cells can have upon another cell in that petri dish is the frequency that they are oscillating at. And it's through that frequency that cells either move towards them or cells move away from them, whether they metastasize well-being or whether they metastasize disease.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept for sure. I heard I don't remember who it was, but I heard somebody talking about humans being like a bacteria on Earth, where
I've
we're
heard that.
spreading and so that just made me think of that. What's your so everybody has their own, like, people go to Reiki and they say that's the best thing, and people go to do Kundalini, and there's all these practices, and it seems like yours, I mean, doing breath work with an intention, I mean, it doesn't get easier for one thing, but do you think that whatever we believe in that's going to help us, do you think that plays a factor as well? So kind of what
Look,
we're thinking we become kind of thing. And if we believe it, do you think that plays a factor in there too?
Look, it certainly does. I see people, for instance, come into ayahuasca and they have a deep belief that it's going to be a benefit to them, and that certainly supports the process. I get to see a lot of very interesting healers and strange sorts of medicine people and whatnot. And for me, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do, whether you're even having a conversation with someone or cooking them a meal. If the individual goes away from that interaction better than they arrived at that interaction, then your medicine is good. And so it doesn't matter if you go and have a Reiki session and you walk out of there feeling better, then the medicine is good and it's been of benefit to you. There are some aspects that I don't subscribe to. Nations is one of them, because um, affirmations is, in my opinion, trying to convince our minds of something. Is a little bit like self-hypnosis. If your affirmation is not congruent, and when I say congruency, I mean when our heads, what we think, and our emotions are not in alignment, we have an inner struggle within. And when we have an inner struggle within, we exist in a state of dis-ease, which will ultimately manifest as disease. Sometimes I get young women that come through for sessions that broke up with their partner a few years ago and they're still struggling deeply with this. And it's limiting them from going into a new relationship because they're carrying so much fear in their vibrational expression, that the sort of people that they're attracting is sort of feeding that. Now, it's a classic example of incongruency because all of the stories that their mind have of what this guy did, he stole my money, he slept with my best friend, are different to what their unconscious and subconscious expression towards this person is, which is that they still love him. Now, in the incongruency between those two things, they are living in an internal state of turmoil. And when I run a little process on people to get down to chunk down to what they actually feel about the person. And when they realize that they still love the person, they realize that love is an expression of them. Love is not dependent upon another human being, even being in front of you. Love is a potent, powerful expression that they can express to anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's not limited by the stories you have in your head of this person. You don't have to get back with the person to recognize your sovereign expression of love.
Yeah, the most important thing is to find that internally, right? And then you can show it to other people. But you have to find it internally first, which
Well,
I think is super important.
these things, these things literally, we hear people say things like, I feel like a great weight has been lifted off my shoulders. It's because the more of these things we have going on inside us, the more density we carry as human beings. And the more that we can seek to integrate these experiences and reconcile these experiences to find congruency in these experiences, the lighter we are. And the less density we carry, the less weight of the world we have, the less energy we burn trying to carry that load.
Do you believe in darkness and light? Do you believe in evil, or do you think it's just an absent of light?
Look, I think it's a little bit like narcissism. I've never met a person that I would say was a card-carrying narcissist, but I've met plenty of people that at times can have an expression of narcissism. And for me, I guess good and evil is similar in that, and I've met some pretty crap people in my lifetime and in my journey. However, I don't know that I could ever say that I've met an evil person, but I've certainly met people who are capable of having expressions of things that I would say are evil.
Yeah, yeah, and I think predominantly humans are good. We're mostly good humans, right? I mean,
You know, even
very
even
rarely,
serial even serial killers kiss their babies, and like,
right? Yeah, it's a strange thing for sure. Yeah. Uh, tell us about your book.
well, I've actually made it available as an online course. So it's just
Oh, nice.
a simple online course that's available online. It takes you through who we are as energetic beings. It takes us through congruency. It takes us through the practices of conscious energetics and how to congruently from the heart sing our vibrational song to the world, and how to notice the effect upon that and to tailor make our expressions. There's a workbook attached to that that's got some simple exercises should you wish to participate, but it's optional. And the feedback I'm getting from people is phenomenal. I've been running this process in my own ceremonies for a couple of years now. It's become central to giving people a tool to walk away with that can anchor them to their higher perspective. Now, I'm not talking about magicianing people or our conscious mind's idea. So there's who we are as a human being, and then there's a secondary effect of our conscious mind interpreting all of that and creating who it thinks we are. Now, it wouldn't serve me very well to be vibrationally expressing that I want to be a powerful, successful businessman. Plenty do that. And certainly they get some benefit from that. But at the end of the day, it's insincere and it's not authentic. And so when it comes to chunking down who it is we want to be, I reference as expressions of our higher self rather than expressions of our lower self. So we all know the difference of when we're operating in our higher self, and we know the difference when we're operating in our lower self. Our higher selves express things like honor, whereas our lower selves, self-depreciating thoughts and attachment to material possessions and things like that. I often say to people, our conscious minds wants a castle full of gold, but our subconscious is happy with just enough money to pay for the dental and have a holiday a year. Now, when it comes to manifesting intentions, one of those things will be manifested for sure. The other one may certainly manifest. My conscious mind wants a Lamborghini, but my subconscious is content with just a reliable car that will get me to get the kids to school and not break down. I may get the Lamborghini and I may crash it, and I may not be able to pay for the service on the thing. But when it comes to well-formed intentions as to manifesting things in our world, we would do well to focus less upon what our conscious mind thinks and more upon what our intuition thinks on the matter.
What about I wanted to ask you, what do you think about so I've heard people talk about Earth being a training ground, if you will, for us. And then whenever we die, we reincarnate. It could be somewhere else. We could be another being. We could be in another dimension, but we go to these places as learning grounds or schools to get to our higher self. Do you believe in any of that?
To be honest with you, Thomas, it's not my mythology. I'm very familiar that I've got a bachelor's degree in philosophy and literature and religion, and so I've been deep into the study of faith of various kinds. My good wife said to me a while back. She said, "When we are born, we're given a box by our parents, and we carry that box through our lives, and it's full of all sorts of things. And eventually, we'll hand that box onto our children, and they will carry that box. And some boxes get heavier and heavier. Some boxes are full of ancestral trauma. Some boxes are full of all sorts of stories. I believe that in our lifetime, it is our responsibility to do the housekeeping on that box so that the box that we hand on to our children is light and can be filled with all of the good things that they want to do in their lives rather than all of the scars of our own existence and our ancestors' existence.
Yeah, I like that for sure. Yeah, because we all carry around a lot of baggage, and a lot of us give that to our children that we
Hmm.
really shouldn't. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's super important. Yeah.
And so if we're talking about, the Buddhist references it as continually incarnating until we are in a state of non-disassociated perceptive awareness where um, where we're not controlled by our conscious mind thinking, and where our energy levels can be controlled, and they eventually will reach a state of emancipation from all of these things. I think it's enough for me in my life. If I do nothing else with my life, Thomas, for the years that I have left, I'm 60 years old, for the years that I have left on this planet, if I do nothing else than walk around in my world as a man of honor and believing that I'm doing good work and being connected and present for the people around me, then for me, that is enough. Really, that is enough. If I spend the years that I have remaining here walking around in my world, and it doesn't matter whether I'm at the supermarket or whether I'm dealing with a client who is about to kill themselves because, I don't advertise my work, it's referral only. So generally, I'll wake up in the morning and there'll be a message on my phone saying, Tony, I've got a friend and they were trying to kill themselves last night. Can I send them to you? And I've got 2 or 3 hours to try and save a life. And touch wood, I've not lost one yet.
Oh man, that's incredible. I was just going to ask you if you had any clients that had profound experience from your practice, and I would say that is definitely profound. So,
Absolutely, and look, and I get a lot of I get a lot of return servicemen come through. Young guys, 37 years old, who were in Afghanistan or Iraq, and um, who 7 years later and many, many medications later, are still carrying the residual echoes of these experiences. I guess when it comes to trauma, I can explain it to you a little bit like when we sprain our ankle, there's a traumatic effect upon our ankle. Now, if we do the right things and we don't take painkillers that mask the pain from our bodies, and our bodies do all the right things on that ankle, it'll repair itself and it will be stronger than it was before. If we do not heal that ankle properly, then we'll experience the echoes of that trauma forever after. 5 years later, we'll be at a dance party and twist our ankle just that certain way, and we will re-traumatize ourselves again, and it will become inflamed. Well, a lot of these issues have to do with inflammation of our psyches. We literally become suddenly inflamed as our conscious minds struggle to understand this overwhelming emotional rise within us. Trauma is really a memory with a high emotional signature attached to it. And practices like ayahuasca and things like that certainly de-intensify the emotional signatures. So they're stored just as memories rather than memories that trigger large emotional responses within us.
I was going to ask you about that. If you thought that the psychedelic therapy, psychedelics are so profound sometimes that you just put the other things out of your mind.
Mm.
Is do you think that could have something to do with it, or I mean,
Well,
you're having such a profound experience with that you kind of forget about what happened to you.
look, there is certainly an effect, and I liken this effect to a study that I read about women and childbirth. In that and I call it cathartic release and cathartic relief. So the mother is there, the waters have broken, the baby's coming, and for hours they are in agonizing pain. I just want this to stop. I just want this thing out of me. When will this end? And then suddenly that baby comes out and they lay that baby on your breast and you look up and through the tears you smile at me. Now, they've determined that that feeling of cathartic relief is so profound that a woman will forget the previous 6 or 7 hours that happened, and in fact they'll go and have more children fully forgetting that part of the experience, but anchoring to the cathartic relief. And I guess that's a little bit what I see in ayahuasca ceremonies is that I see people going through some of the most traumatic stuff and dealing with some of the most traumatic issues of their lives. And they have their heads in buckets, throwing up for hours and crying, wailing in tears. But come Sunday morning, they are sitting there as beings of light, suddenly experiencing cathartic relief, and often they can't even remember the reason why they came to start with.
It's kind of crazy, you explain that in normal terms of what's going to happen when you take that. As you said, you're going to throw up, you're probably going to shit in your pants or your robe or whatever you have on. And, it sounds horrible, but people are drawn to it for whatever reason. And they've been drawn to it for thousands of years. So, to
Yeah.
me, uh, plant medicine, it has to be here for a reason. Um, and we use it for the wrong reasons too. Here in the US, where all the states now are going legal with weed, which
Mm.
whatever. I don't see that as a drug myself anyway. And unless, but let me be clear, I don't think kids should smoke weed. If you're under
Yeah.
18, I do not think you should be smoking weed. So please don't. But for getting sleep at night or for to help stress, cancer patients to help you eat because it will make you eat. That's the only side effect it's ever had on me is severe munchies. So I do think it's a good thing to use if we use it right. But once again, not everybody can because you have people that just wait, they're smoking all day long and not using it in the right way.
Look, I think that the commercialization of these things is somewhat destructive. I mean, you're exactly right. I've seen cannabis assisting people that are going through chemotherapy, literally taking them from laying in a dark room all day to sitting in the lounge room engaging with their children and having a life again. But in the commercialization of it, it's kind of becoming, it's not decriminalized here in Australia. In a couple of states it is, but pretty much everyone I know has a prescription for it now, whether it be for gummy bears or whether it be for actual cannabis. It's become another pharmaceutical substance that is to be commercialized and sold. And as I mentioned earlier, the same thing's happening in the psychedelic realm where suddenly psilocybin is a fix it all, another miracle thing that should be for everyone. And traditionally, in many tribes, it was not the tribe itself that sat these psychedelics; it was the medicine practitioner that sat and had the messages for the others. I would certainly never say to someone who just rang me up on the phone, "You should take psychedelics." I would say, "Come and have a chat with me and." Let's see where you're at. Let's see what medications you might be on. Let's see whether there's any instances of medical, mental health issues or anything like that. The last thing I would want to do is um, do anything that may leave somebody walking away feeling worse. And that's not to say there's not great power in it and great healing. It's one of the gifts that has certainly been given to us. Any individual has the birthright to go walking in the fields and to pick up some pieces of fungus that are growing on the ground and consume them. It is our birthright, and these things are here for us to utilize if they serve us. However, we would not walk in the field and pick up an unidentified piece of fungus and put it in our mouths because it may kill us.
Yeah, not all of them are fun for sure. And I'm a giant MMA fan, and there's a lot of fighters right now. It's been the last maybe 5 to 10 years that talk about microdosing psilocybin, and they say that they get incredible focus out of it, and it really helps them with their sparring and reaction time, and just like kind of slowing things down. So
I
it's
guess
really
it's because
interesting.
the function of psychedelics is to limit the dominance of our prefrontal cortex. So Our prefrontal cortex is responsible for a lot of things, and one of the key functions of it is filtering. So if you live on a busy road, which has a lot of traffic noise, within a couple of months, your prefrontal cortex will have filtered that out, and so you no longer hear the traffic. Our prefrontal cortex also filters out emotions and a whole lot of other things. So by taking psychedelics, even at the microdose level, it suspends some functionality of that allows us to focus more. There's scientific research I was looking at recently that it in fact allows us to hear a wider range of sound and to see a wider range of colors. I know that traditionally in the Amazon, ayahuasca was used for hunting at night because your spatial awareness becomes increased, your night vision becomes increased, your auditory capabilities become increased. So most certainly it's something that can help us focus on things and things. Psilocybin microdosing is extremely at the extremely mild end of things. So I've not ever seen anyone have what I would determine to be a non-beneficial effect from microdosing psilocybin. However, as I mentioned earlier, I have some clients who are returned servicemen, and I certainly wouldn't, put them into an 8-hour ayahuasca ceremony in a group of other people laying on mattresses because some of these guys are trained killers, and I'd dread to think what would happen to them. However, I would certainly use 5-MeO DMT with them, Bufo with them, because no matter what happens, I'm sure that within 10 to 15 minutes that they'll be back again. And so no matter what their experience is, and often I see a lot of somatic release. So a lot of these guys have had fairly significant hits to their bodies and are carrying a lot of kinesthetic trauma. And so most certainly under 5-MeO DMT, I will see a lot of cathartic release physically and somatic release. But no matter what happens, I know that within 10 or 15 minutes, they're going to be sitting up and looking at me again and going, wow, what just happened? And from a facilitator point of view, it's a lot more manageable than supporting someone through, 7 or 8 hours of psychedelic looping.
Yeah. What do you want people to remember you by? What do you want people to say about you when you're gone? What do you want your legacy to be?
That's an interesting thing, Thomas. And we hear a lot of people these days talking about ancestral trauma, and in my opinion, ancestral trauma is not what we know about our ancestors, but it's what we don't know about our ancestors. And so, I get a lot of men come through, and I say to them, "What can you tell me about your great grandfather?" And they'll say to me something like, "He was a drunk and he went to the war." Now that's 90 years of existence consolidated into the oral history of he was a drunk and he went to the war. And so I guess that when it comes down to how I want to be remembered, the oral history I want my children to be telling their children, it is a rich oral history, Thomas. I want them to know the stories. I want them to know that I held babies and cried and played guitar like a blooming crazy man. I want them to know that I helped a lot of people. I want them to know that I cried. I don't want them to just know my trauma stories. I want them to know the celebrations in my life. I want a rich oral history of who I am to be passed down to my grandchildren so that they have a solid fixed point of who they are, so that they have a solid fixed point to chart their own course through their lives.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful for sure. And I think too many times we get so busy that we don't think about things like that. We're just busy. You have to get the kids to practice and you have to do this and you have to get this done and you have to clean the house and there's all these things to do and we just forget about slowing down for a minute and enjoying each other as humans.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Where can
And
everybody find you?
remembering
Do you have anything?
and remembering to take a deep breath.
Yes. What percentage of people do you think never think about taking a breath?
Well,
99%?
I think that we default ourselves to shallow breathing.
Yeah, I think so too. Most people just don't even think about it at all.
Yeah, yeah. I had a very interesting conversation with a shaman in the Wachuma practice, and I was referring somebody to him to have a chat with, And I said, "Do you want some background on this person?" And he said, "No, no." He said, "I'm not even going to ask this person what's wrong until I apply my elemental diagnosis to them." He said, "So I will address the element of earth with them. What's their nutrition like? Are they eating good food? Are they absorbing the food that they're eating? Is the food that they're eating going into their bodies?" He said, "I'll address the element of water. Are they hydrated? Are the liquids that they're drinking being absorbed by their bodies or just being passed through their bodies? Is it living fluid or is it just bottled fluid?" He said, "I will address the element of air. Are they breathing deeply enough or are they just shallow breathing? Are they slumped forward or are they sitting up straight and breathing with their whole lungs?" He said, "And the element of fire, what is their chi like? What is their energy, their perceptive energy levels like? Is their perceptive energy levels high or are their perceptive energy levels low?" He says, "And until I address those things with an individual, I'm not even going to ask them what's wrong." He said, "Because if I ask them what was wrong at the start, I will get a completely different answer to if I ask them what's wrong after I've addressed those things." So that was resonated very strongly with.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. Yeah. I I want to go back. You were when you were talking about the hunters in a tribe used to use ayahuasca for night hunts. That seems really crazy to me.
Well,
I'm guessing it's some kind of it can't be a full dose, right?
from the Western perspective, when the lineage of ayahuasca in our Western world came from only a couple of tribes which have specific practices surrounding it. However, traditionally, it's been used for all sorts of things, and certainly, yeah, a low-level dose, and go out hunting. All manner of things it's been used for. I mean, I was talking to one shaman who says that in his tribe it was used for couples counseling, where they'd just give the husband and the wife a low dose and put them in a hut together for the evening. We were only really exposed to a very traditional and quite rigid framework of ayahuasca ceremony. But traditionally, for thousands of years, it's been used for all manner of things to support all manner of things. Even here in Australia, I've met Indigenous people who talk to me of there's a specific wattle here in Australia that's very high in DMT. And he said traditionally we would collect armfuls of these wattles and burn them on our fires and dance around in the smoke for some hours. And, it was literally the basis of their mythology.
Wow, wow. Yeah, and I guess we're just not used to, we're used to our comfy little houses and all of our technology, and we're just not used to I remember watching Steve Ranella. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he has the show Meat Eaters, and he would go to different places. And I remember one time he was somewhere with a tribe, and they were hunting monkeys and shot a monkey to eat, and he was like just just kind of taken away by the to them it's normal, that's
Hmm.
that's what they eat. To
Hmm.
him, it was like, "Holy cow, we're gonna eat a monkey," like, it doesn't make sense, but
Hmm.
it
Yep.
depends on where you're from and what your customs are, and so what's weird to one person is completely normal to somebody else.
Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
I think that, and this is particularly relevant for today's ages, is that, as human beings, where are we indigenous to, Thomas? Are we indigenous to our limited geographic area or are we indigenous to this planet? Because I've been lucky enough to travel to some fairly obscure places on this planet, but I've never met a person who did not recognize my birthright as having been indigenous to this planet. And there is nowhere on this planet that I can wander and not call home. In the last 2,000 years, my ancestors have traveled large distances away from where they were originally based. I find myself on the other side of the planet, living on First Nation land here in Australia. But yet I've not met an Indigenous person in this country that did not recognize my birthright as being Indigenous to this planet. And so there is nowhere on this planet that I cannot wander and respectfully and humbly not call home.
Did you live in Antarctica for a while?
No, no, it is listed on my Facebook page, I think, though.
I thought I read that and I was like, "Holy cow, that's a big change there."
No. I don't. I live in the north, where the sort of the tropics. I moved away from the colder areas of Australia because I just do not like the cold.
Yeah, that's what we're planning on doing too. We're in the Northeast, so we're thinking about moving to somewhere warmer, at least halfway to Florida, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll see.
yeah, yeah.
The warmer the better for me. I don't care if I ever see a day under 70 degrees again, to be honest with you.
I remember riding my bike to school in Melbourne, Australia, and I remember it being so cold that my ears were just stinging in pain from the coldness of and I was determined to not raise my children in such a place.
Yeah, every winter now, I hate it more and more. I used to not mind it. I love hunting and fishing and just anything outdoors, but man, anymore, when it's 10 below zero, I really don't care to even go outside now. I would if it was, if it's I had a hunting trip or something, but I'd rather stay warm and be in the water fishing or something for sure now. It feels better on your body.
You mentioned something before, Thomas, about the monkey and stuff, and it brought to mind something I heard on a podcast a while back, and it was something to the effect of, we have a lot of rules and boundaries over what we will put in the holes of our body. And so we have a lot of rules and boundaries over what we would put in our mouth, for instance. We would not pick
Mm.
something up off the ground and put it in our mouths. If something doesn't smell quite right, we will not pick it up and put it in our mouths. But yet we have no boundaries and discretion about what we put in the other holes of our body. We rub things on our skins that go into our
Yeah.
bodies, the things that come through our eyes. We have no discretion. We doom scroll for hours without any discretion and boundaries over what we'll put in. We listen to things in the course of our day that, are not good food for our brains. And so we would do well to have rules and boundaries over what we'd put into any orifice of our body, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think it's so important, especially for your kids, because we see it all the time. There are people just slapping sunscreen all over their kids and
Mhm.
feeding them chicken nuggets and Tootsie Rolls or whatever, and for little kids especially, they're relying on us to make good decisions for them.
Well,
So, I just think
the things you learn between the age of 1 and 5 and then 1 to 10, the beliefs and values that we are conditioned with echo on for the rest of our lives.
yeah, I remember hearing someone say, and this is an old text, I don't remember who, but it was, "Give me a child until he's 7, and I'll show you the man," or something like that, because we're
Exactly.
essentially just a sponge.
But I've heard the exact same thing, and in some fields of psychology, they will say that really our lives are governed by the values and beliefs that we are conditioned with at a small age. And I know that in neuro-linguistic programming with timelining and that, certainly you can put your finger on. I was talking to somebody recently about it, and they were saying, "Oh, well, I was sexually abused at 12." But then when we delved into it further, we found that the actual issue was is that they were conditioned to be too trusting. And so at the age of 12, where another child may not have willingly walked into the back room with that person, they did. And why did they do that? Because they had a belief and value that was given to them at a younger age than that, that did not pick up the warning signs, that did not allow them to say no when they should have, that put them into that vulnerable situation. And so he was that person spending 30 years trying to address what they thought was the issue, when in fact the issue was something far more insidious and something that was far earlier. I mean, we go through our lives saying, "Oh, well, I have trauma because that person beat me with a stick." But then we spend the next 30 years and it's our hand on that stick that we keep beating ourselves with, well beyond the initial beating. I say, there's being messed up, and then there's being messed up about being messed up.
Yeah, I heard a great analogy about that too. The guy said that, when somebody says something that hurts you or does something to hurt you, so he compared it to getting shot, them shooting you with an arrow, right? He says it's so when they do this thing that hurts you, they're shooting you with an arrow, and they only shoot you one time. But the problem is, you pull that arrow out and you keep stabbing yourself with it over and over and over and over again.
That's it. That's exactly it. It's our hand on the arrow from that point on. And I say to people, I said, if you're feeling triggered, then it's useful to remember that it's your finger on the trigger, not theirs.
Yes, yes, we have the right to. All of us have that right to not think about it that way and think about other things, or look at it from another perspective. So, yeah, I think we're at a place right now where people don't want other people to have different opinions, but
Mm.
it's okay. We all have different opinions and it's all right. It's okay to disagree with somebody and say, well, that's your opinion's interesting and I respect that and I appreciate that and move on.
Yeah, I see a lot of particularly men suffer with an infliction that is righteousness. And I remember my father saying to me at one point when I was growing up, he says, with regards to having a happy relationship, he said, you can either be right or you can be happy. And I see that, particularly I've seen a lot of men that fell out with their families during the COVID thing because they were of one side of the camp and their children were of the other side of the camp, and they haven't spoken to their children for some years because of their righteousness. And I say to them, I say, well, wait a minute, did you raise sheep? Like, I know you. It doesn't occur to me that you would just raise kids that would do what you told them to do. It seems to me that you raised free thinking, sovereign individuals that are capable of making up their own minds. And it's down to you to respect their decision. And some of them hold on to their righteousness and still don't speak to their children. And some of them temper their righteousness a little bit and acknowledge the sovereignty of their children and repair those broken relationships and take that weight off their shoulders.
Yeah, it really is. It really is sad when something so senseless comes between humans, and we don't. Most of the time, it's senseless things. It doesn't even make it. It's just crazy. So
Which,
I
which is
don't know.
why it's interesting when we have phenomena like hurricanes or floods and things like that, because when those things happen, our mythology, our political alliances, our beliefs and values fall away, and we find ourselves as human beings reaching out our hand to help another human being onto the boat, regardless of what their denomination is, regardless of what their political affiliations are, regardless of what their worldview is. At the end of the day, it takes for something like that to happen for us to simply reach out our hands to another human being. And it shouldn't take for that to happen. We should be doing that all the time. I cannot hold my own beliefs without honoring the beliefs of another. My sort of a pagan neo shaman. My wife is quite a strict Muslim. I
Wow.
I I honor her way. I honor her path. It would not do me well to not honor her path, and it doesn't matter who you may say you believe in and what that may be dressed up at, whether it has a head of an elephant or whether it has a halo or whether it has whatever. Who am I if I am not to honor the sovereign beliefs of another human being?
Yeah. Right. Right. And when you think about it, there's 8,000 religions in the world, and everybody thinks they have the right one. So it's,
Exactly. There,
that should tell us all.
there seems to be a clause in a lot of those religions saying that only through this way is the way.
Yeah. Yeah. That should be a red flag immediately to me.
But yet, you know, contemporary, um, most contemporary representations of religion that I see um, is able to honor the fact that at the end of the day, we're probably all talking about the same source. No matter what costumery or garmentry or dogma we want to apply to that, at the end of the day, we really don't need any books to tell us what a good human being is and how to treat another person with compassion and honor. I think that that is a common theme across all of the religions. And when we chunk it down to what those common themes are, there's extremism in all forms, in all religions, in all practices, in all politics. But I think that at the heart of it, we know what a good human being looks like. And in fact, it is a representation of our higher selves. And the more we walk in our higher selves, the better we feel in ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. What do you have going on new? Do you have anything new going on?
Currently, I'm looking at a module for training facilitators in conscious energetics because quite a few of the people that have come through the process now and have said to me, look, I'd love to spread this message further and I'd love to be able to do workshops and take people through this. And so I'm currently working on a module to sort of create a facilitator program for this work. It's non-denominational, it's non-political, it's non-spiritual. It's simply a practice for representing yourself, not just what you might think you are, but actually believing it heart and soul and pushing it out there to your world and watching what happens when the world responds completely differently. I often say to people, they've really changed their tune. And we use that phrase from time to time, but yet the person looks the same. They're still talking the same. They've still got the same values and beliefs. But what are we feeling about that person? We're feeling that their vibe has changed. We often use it with regards to teenage boys who were going off the rails and suddenly are not going off the rails. And it's like, wow, they've really changed their tune. Well, what is it that we're feeling that makes us say that? We're feeling that their vibrational expression is no longer as sketchy as it was. And so instead of just unconsciously bleeding our hearts out on our sleeves to the world, I believe there's great power in intentionally informing our unconscious and our vibrational expression of what we want it to be rather than what it's unconsciously representing.
That's some awesome wisdom, man. It really is. It just more humans would just try to be a better human. That's all we would need. And
Oh,
not to plug my own book, but behind me I just published this How to Not Suck as a Human. It's just a short book and it has a little humor and a little sarcasm, but it
I love it.
also has some basic things you can do to not suck as a human.
I love it.
If if we all could just try to be a little nicer to each other, that's all it would take. Just be a good human. It's really not that hard. So,
It would
man,
certainly be a good place to start.
yeah, for sure. Tony, it was really good having you on, man. I really appreciate it. And you have a ton of wisdom and a ton of cool things going on. I want to learn more about the breath work and I'll talk to you. We'll talk about it after this, but because I'd like to learn about that too, for sure. The more I learn about all these things, the more I want to do the simple things that can help your life. I mean, instead of, as you said, doing a 3 hour activity or something you can do in 5 minutes wherever you're at and have a little therapy, I think it's really important. So I'm super grateful for what you're doing.
Thomas, thank you very much, brother. It's been an honor. It's been an honor, and thank you for inviting me to be on your wonderful podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.